son slid a manila envelope across the kitchen table and said, "Dad, we need to talk about the arrangement." His wife sat beside him with her hands folded and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Inside the envelope was a 4-page document titled Voluntary Asset Management Agreement. It said I was transferring control of my savings account, my pension, and a deed to my house, the house I'd built with my own hands in 1987, to my son and daughter-in-law. Defective immediately. At the bottom was a line for my signature. I looked up. My son wouldn't meet my eyes. 3 days later, I found out why. I should have seen it coming. I think part of me did. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer with the Tennessee Valley Authority before my knees and a mild heart arrhythmia pushed me into early retirement 2 years ago. My wife Cecilia passed in the spring of 2021, breast cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. I held her hand through all of it, and when she was gone, the house on Richmond Road felt like a museum. Everything exactly where she left it, her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her handwriting still on the grocery list pinned to the fridge. My son, Nathan, had called me that August. "Dad, why don't you come stay with us for a while? You shouldn't be alone out there." His voice was warm, easy. He sounded like the boy I raised. "Fiona and I have the space. The guest room's just sitting empty. Come for a few weeks, see how it feels." I thought about it for 2 days. Then I said yes. I packed what I needed, put the Ridgemont house in a property management program that would rent it out while I was gone, and drove 3 hours north to their place in Clarksville, a big colonial revival on a cul-de-sac, 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, HOA fees they mentioned twice in the last year. I'd helped with a down payment, $50,000 back in 2019 when interest rates were still low, and Nathan said it was the right time to buy. I didn't ask for anything in return. That's not how family works. At least, that's what I believed. The first week was fine. Dinners together, Sunday football, Fiona making coffee in the mornings and asking how I slept. Normal. Nice even. I started to think maybe Nathan had been right. Maybe I had been too alone. The second week, things shifted. Small things at first. Fiona asking questions about my retirement income. How much was the TVA pension exactly? Did I still have the IRA from my Boeing years? What about the house? What was the current market value out in Cookville? I answered because they were my family, and I didn't think to be guarded. Then came the dinner. Nathan called it a family conversation. A Tuesday night in September. Pork chops, mashed potatoes, green beans. Fiona had cooked, which she almost never did. The table was set properly. Cloth napkins. The good glasses. I should have noticed that. Nathan waited until I'd eaten most of my meal. Then he reached under his chair and pulled out the envelope. "Dad, we've been talking," he said, "and we're worried about you. The house, the finances, managing everything alone. You had the heart thing last year, and we just think it would be easier if Fiona and I helped oversee things, just to take the burden off you." I opened the envelope, read the first page, then the second. It wasn't a help agreement. It was a transfer. Full control of my accounts, my pension routing, and a quitclaim deed on the Ridgemont property, signed over to Nathan and Fiona jointly. "Where did this come from?" I said. "We had an attorney draft it," Fiona said. Her voice was practiced, gentle. "It's really just a formality, Gerald. My name is not Gerald." I said it quietly. She'd called me that twice before, and I'd let it go. Gerald was Cecilia's father. He died before Nathan was born. "My name is Walt." She smiled. "Of course, Walt. This is just to make sure everything is protected." I looked at my son. He was staring at his plate. "Nathan," I said, "look at me." He did. "Briefly, I'm not signing this." I pushed back my chair, picked up the envelope, and walked to the guest room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I sat on the edge of the bed and read all 4 pages twice more in the quiet. The document had been prepared by a firm called Stratton and Reeves out of Nashville. I didn't know them. The language was precise, thorough, and clearly written by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't something Nathan had come up with on his own. He wasn't that kind of thinker. Fiona was. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. Then I typed the firm's name into a search engine and found their website. Real Estate and Estate Planning. Their client intake form asked for the client's name and the name of the beneficiary directing the engagement. I stared at that phrase for a long time. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and thought about Cecilia, what she would have made of this. She'd always been careful around Fiona. Not unkind, just careful. She once said to me, "Nathan loves her, that's enough. But watch." I'd asked what she meant. She just squeezed my hand and changed the subject. I wish I had pressed her harder on that. At 6 in the morning, I got up, dressed, and walked to the kitchen. Nathan was already there, coffee in hand, looking like he hadn't slept either. We looked at each other across the counter. "How long has she been planning this?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. That was its own answer. "Dad, I need to leave," I said. "Today." He didn't stop me. I loaded my car in 40 minutes, drove to a Cracker Barrel off I-24, and sat in the parking lot with a cup of coffee, my phone, and the photographs of those 4 pages. The lot was mostly empty, a semi idled near the highway on ramp. I sat there for a long time. There was a woman I needed to call. Her name was June Abernethy. She'd been my and Cecilia's family attorney for over 20 years. Wills, the house deed, the IRA beneficiary designations, all of it. She was 71, semi-retired, sharp as a tack, and she'd loved Cecilia like a younger sister. I checked the time. 7:12. Too early, but I didn't have the luxury of waiting. She answered on the 3rd ring. Wald Mercer. "It's 7 in the morning. "June," I said, "I've got a problem." A pause. "Tell me." I told her about the envelope, the asset transfer document, the attorney firm, the dinner, the 4 pages. I kept my voice level. My hands weren't quite steady on the phone. I'd had the arrhythmia since last year, and stress made it worse, but my voice held. When I finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. "That's elder financial abuse, Walt. Tennessee Code annotated 716117. It's also potentially criminal fraud if she engaged that attorney under false pretenses." Another pause. "Where are you right now?" "Cracker Barrel parking lot off I-24. "Good Lord." I heard her set something down. "Come to my office, 9 o'clock. Bring those photographs. And if you have any documentation of financial support you've given them over the years, transfers, checks, anything, bring that too." "I have bank records." "Of course you do. You're an engineer." 9 o'clock, Walt, and don't go back to that house." I sat in the parking lot for another 20 minutes after we hung up. A waitress in a brown apron unlocked the front door. A couple of truckers climbed out of their cab, stretching. The world just kept moving like nothing had happened. I thought about 2019, the $50,000 for the down payment. I thought about 320, when Nathan's consulting business had a bad quarter and I'd covered their mortgage for 3 months. I thought about the hospital bills from when Fiona had her appendix out, the ones insurance didn't fully cover, $8,000, which I'd paid without being asked. I thought about the new HVAC system I paid to have installed at their house last summer because Nathan mentioned it was struggling, $6,400. I'd never tracked any of it. It hadn't seemed like something you tracked with family. June's office was in a brick building near the old courthouse square in Cookville. She was waiting for me with coffee in a TVA mug. She dug it out specifically, I knew, because she thought it would make me feel steadier, and a yellow legal pad already open on her desk. "Sit," she said. "Start from the beginning." I went through it all again. She took notes in her precise handwriting. When I laid my phone on the desk and showed her the photographs of the 4-page document, she put on her reading glasses and studied it without speaking for a full 2 minutes. "This is professional work," she said. "This isn't Nathan." "No," I said, "it's not." "Do you know how long she's been planning this?" "I'm trying to find out." She turned to the legal pad. "Okay, here's what we do. First, we document your financial contributions to their household. Everything you can find, bank statements, check images, payment apps, anything. Second, we get your estate documents in order. Your current will names Nathan as primary beneficiary. We need to review whether that should change and what conditions should be attached. Third, we send a formal cease and desist to Stratton and Reeves, notifying them that you are represented and that the document they prepared constitutes attempted financial exploitation under state law. That should rattle them. What does this cost me? I asked. She looked at me over her glasses. Don't be ridiculous. I went back to Cookville, to the property I owned there. Not the Ridgemont house, which was still in the rental program, but a small cabin I'd built on 5 acres just east of town. A place I used mostly in hunting season. It had a wood stove, a decent mattress, and Wi-Fi I'd installed 3 years ago so I could work remotely before I retired. I could live there. That night I sat at the table with my laptop and my bank records and worked backward through 3 years of transactions. The entries came back with memory attached. November 2020 mortgage coverage, $22,200. February 2021 hospital bill, Fiona's appendectomy, $8,075. June 2021 Cecilia's funeral. I'd taken nothing from Nathan and Fiona. They had offered, and I had said no, I could handle it. July 2022 business loan to Nathan, $15,000. He'd paid back $3,000, then gone quiet on the rest. August 2023, HBAC, $6,400. January 2024, Nathan's truck needed a transmission. I'd written a check for $4,200 because he asked. I built a spreadsheet. Total documented support, $89,475 over 3 years, not counting the $50,000 for the house in 2019. That brought it to $139,475, and they had handed me a document designed to take the rest. I found a text thread with Nathan from July, scrolling back. Dad, Fiona found a good attorney who does family estate planning. Says it might make sense for you since you're on your own now. I'd responded that I already had June. It said, this one specializes in situations like yours. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. I did now. I screenshotted 46 text messages. On the 4th day, I drove past the Clarksville house. I didn't stop, didn't slow down. I just looked. Fiona's car was in the driveway. Nathan's truck was gone. A lawn care company was working on the grass. The lawn care I'd paid for last spring as a birthday gift to Nathan, which apparently hadn't stopped. On the 5th day, I got a text from Nathan. Dad, we should talk. You left things unresolved. Fiona just wants what's best for the family. I stared at it. I had spent 64 years building something. A career, a home, a marriage, a son I was proud of. I had stayed faithful through all of it, to my work, to my wife, to my family. And now the word family was being used against me. I typed back, I'll be in touch through my attorney. Then I blocked his number. June sent the cease and desist to Stratton and Reeves on a Thursday. By Tuesday, the firm had sent a withdrawal letter. They were no longer representing Nathan or Fiona in this matter. I felt something when I read that. Not triumph. More like the first clear breath after being underwater. What do they do next? I asked June. Depends on how desperate they are, she said. They still have $112,000 in equity in that Clarksville house, most of which came from your down payment. They know that. If they're smart, they go quiet. If they're not, they try something else. They tried something else. 2 weeks after the cease and desist, a certified letter arrived from a different attorney, Marcus Webb, Family Law, Nashville. It was a petition for limited guardianship, citing my cardiac arrhythmia and what it described as erratic financial behavior, including refusing legally prepared financial planning documents. They were trying to have me declared partially incapacitated. I sat in the cabin and read it twice. My left hand was resting on the table, perfectly still. The arrhythmia was under control with medication. My thinking was clear. Clearer, in some ways, than it had been in years. I called June. I expected this, she said. You expected it? Walt, this is the second move in a standard exploitation playbook. First you present a voluntary transfer and hope they sign. When they don't, you try the court system. If they can get a guardianship appointed, even a limited one, they can get control of your accounts through legal process instead of a signature. Can they win? Not if we fight, she said. Here's what we need. The list was similar to before, but with additions. Current cardiac evaluation from my cardiologist, Dr. Raymond Sloan, confirming that my arrhythmia did not affect my cognition or decision-making. A financial competency letter. An affidavit from someone outside the family who could speak to my mental sharpness. I called my friend of 28 years, Hector Fuentes, a retired civil engineer I'd worked alongside at TVA for 2 decades. I explained what was happening. He didn't say much for a moment. "What do you need?" he said. "An affidavit. Written statement about my cognitive condition." "You've known me long enough." "Walt," he said, "I watched you run structural load calculations in your head on a bridge project in 2009. You want me to write down that your brain works? I'll need more paper." It was the first time I'd laughed in 3 weeks. Dr. Sloan saw me on a Wednesday. He reviewed my most recent EKG and Holter monitor results, ran a brief cognitive screen, and dictated a letter on the spot. Mr. Walter Mercer presents with a well-controlled cardiac arrhythmia managed with standard medication. His cognitive function is entirely unimpaired. He is fully capable of managing his personal, legal, and financial affairs independently. His nurse notarized it before I left the building. June filed a 40-page opposition to the guardianship petition 9 days before the hearing. The hearing was in a courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Montgomery County Courthouse. I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn to TBA retirement dinners. June sat beside me. Across the aisle, Nathan sat with his attorney, Marcus Webb, a tall man in a grey suit who kept reorganizing his papers. Fiona sat next to Nathan. She was dressed carefully, conservatively. She looked composed. She caught my eye once, and I held her gaze until she looked away. The judge was a woman named Honorable Diane Fogel. She was methodical and gave no expression. Marcus Webb presented his case: my arrhythmia, my refusal to accept help, the transfer document which he described as standard estate planning I had inexplicably rejected. Then June stood up. She presented Dr. Sloan's letter first, then the cognitive screen results, then Hector's affidavit. Then she presented the spreadsheet, $139,000 in documented financial support over 5 years. Then the text message thread, where Fiona had steered Nathan toward the Stratton and Reeves attorney 2 months before the envelope appeared at dinner. Then she played the recording. I want to explain the recording because it matters. Before I'd left Clarksville, I had recorded one conversation on my phone, a brief exchange the morning I loaded my car when Nathan had come to the doorway and said, "Dad, if you just talk to Fiona, she can explain the whole thing. You're not understanding what it's supposed to do." I'd said, "Nathan, the document transfers my house to your joint name. I understand exactly what it does." He'd gone quiet. And then, after a moment, he'd said something I hadn't expected. He said, "She said you'd be like this. She said you'd make it hard." I had pressed record about 30 seconds into that exchange. The audio was clear. The courtroom was quiet after June played it. Judge Fogel looked at Nathan over her glasses. "Mr. Bordley, Mercer," she said, "who prepared the asset transfer document in question?" Nathan's attorney started to answer. Fogel held up one finger. "I asked your client." Nathan swallowed. "My wife found the attorney." "And what was your understanding of what the document would accomplish?" A pause. "She said it would protect my dad's assets by transferring them to your name." Silence. Judge Fogel closed the folder in front of her. "This petition is dismissed. The evidence presented suggests that Mr. Mercer is a fully competent adult who refused a document he had every right to refuse. I am noting in the record that the circumstances of this petition raise concerns consistent with financial exploitation of an elderly adult under Tennessee Code 71-61017. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office." The gavel came down. Nathan didn't look at me when they stood to leave. Fiona looked at me once, a long, measuring look, like she was recalculating something. Then they walked out through a side door. On the courthouse steps, Hector clapped me on the shoulder without saying a word. June shook my hand and told me the Stratton and Reeves referral to the Bar Association was already filed. We'd know within 60 days if any sanctions would follow. I drove back to the cabin through the Tennessee hills, windows down, the October air coming in clean and cold. I stopped once at a gas station outside Cookville and bought a cup of coffee and a bag of peanuts, which was the kind of meal Cecilia would have scolded me for, and I ate them in the parking lot and felt, for the first time in 2 months, like myself. Cecilia had a saying she picked up from her own mother. The truth doesn't need a lawyer, but it helps to have one. I thought it was just something she said. Now I understood it in my bones. 2 weeks after the hearing, a letter arrived from the DA's office. They had opened a formal investigation into the asset transfer scheme, including Fiona's direction of the Stratton and Reeves engagement. The investigation was expected to take 90 days. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired in the way you feel when something you've been holding up for too long finally gets set down. Hector came out to the cabin that weekend. We sat on the back porch and watched deer move through the tree line at dusk, and didn't talk about any of it for a while. Then he said, "You know what Nathan's problem is? Tell me. He picked somebody to love who doesn't know how to love back. That's not your fault, and it's not entirely his either." I thought about that for a long time. Nathan called the following Tuesday, from a number I didn't recognize. He must have known I'd blocked the other one. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. "Dad." His voice was different. Flat. Exhausted. Fionona moved out. I didn't say anything. She went to her sister's in Memphis, she said. He stopped. Started again. The attorney told her the investigation changes things. Her exposure. I see. Dad, I didn't know it would go this far. His voice broke slightly on the last word. I knew she was working on something. I thought she was trying to help. Nathan. I said it evenly. I raised you to know the difference between helping someone and taking from them. You're a grown man. You saw that document. A long silence. "I know," he said. "I know." I didn't tell him I forgave him. I wasn't there yet, but I told him I'd talk to him again in time when I was ready. That was the truth, and I'd learned to trade in nothing, but I updated my will that November, sitting at June's desk on a cold grey morning with the heat running and coffee in the TVA mugs. I kept Nathan as a beneficiary, not out of naivety, but because Cecilia would have wanted it, and because I believed people could choose differently than they had. But the terms were different now. Specific, documented, overseen by a trustee June recommended. Nothing could move without accountability. I moved back to the Ridgemont house in December when the rental lease ended. The first thing I did was take Cecilia's reading glasses off the nightstand and put them in the cedar box where I kept her letters. Not to forget her, just to acknowledge that she'd been gone long enough that her glasses didn't need to be on the nightstand anymore. I called her brother in January. He'd known her since before I did, and he was the kind of man who told you hard things gently. I told him what had happened. He listened through all of it. Then he said, "She knew, Walt. She didn't know exactly, but she knew. She told me once, right before she got sick, that she worried about you being alone. Not because he couldn't manage, she knew you could manage, but because you'd give whatever anybody asked for, and not everyone was worth that." I didn't trust my voice for a moment. She was right, I finally said. Hector and I started having coffee on Friday mornings at a diner in town, a habit we'd let go of after we both retired. We picked it back up. The waitress, a woman named Berta who'd worked there for 20 years and moved at the pace of someone who'd outlasted everyone, brought us refills without being asked and left us alone, which was exactly the right amount of attention. One Friday in March, Hector said, "You ever going to tell Nathan about the money, the full amount? He knows what I gave them. Does he know it was $139,000? I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug. "I'll tell him someday, when it matters for the right reasons, not the wrong ones." Hector nodded like that made sense to him, which it did, because we'd known each other long enough to not need everything spelled out. The DA's office sent a letter in April. Charges had been filed against Fiona. 1 count of attempted financial exploitation of an elderly adult. 1 count of fraud in the procurement of legal services. Marcus Webb, the guardianship attorney, had cooperated with investigators and provided documentation of Fiona's direction of the scheme. The Stratton and Rees firm faced a separate bar complaint for failing to independently verify the nature of the engagement. I sat at the kitchen table and read the letter twice. Outside, the Ridgemont backyard was coming back into spring. The dogwood Cecilia had planted in 2003, putting out white blossoms, the same as it did every April. I thought about who I'd been before all of this. Not worse, not stupid, just someone who had given without measuring, because he'd been taught that family didn't require a ledger. That part of me wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete. What I'd learned, slowly, expensively, in the parking lots of gas stations and on courthouse steps, and in a cabin in the Tennessee hills, was that love is not the same as access. You can love someone and still say no. You can be a father and still draw a line. The people who deserve what you have to give are the ones who would never demand it. I take my walks in the mornings now, down Ridgemont Road and back, 30 minutes, the way my cardiologist recommended. The arrhythmia is controlled. My hands are steady. My mind is clear. Some mornings I pass the old Baxter place 2 houses down, which has been empty since the Baxters moved to Florida, and I think about whether I should fix it up, do something with it, give myself a project the way engineers need projects. Some mornings I just walk and don't think about anything in particular, just the sound of the birds coming back and the air still cool enough to feel clean. I'm 64 years old. I built a career, raised a son, loved a woman for 33 years. I've still got a long way to go, and for the first time in a long time, I believe that.